When the bulldozers showed up, I thought it was a mistake. But within weeks, the HOA had built an entire neighborhood, 96 brand new homes right on my land. They laughed when I warned them, said I didn't understand community development. So I smiled and let them finish. Every house, every driveway, every fence, all built on what was legally mine. They didn't know I had the deed tucked safely away. And when the day came, I pulled it out in court. Would you have stopped them, or let them dig their own grave? Before all the chaos, life in Maple Ridge Estates felt peaceful. Quiet mornings, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes down cul-de-sacs that all looked the same. I bought my 5-acre stretch years before the HOA even existed, a patch of open land just beyond the new development's border. It was my little escape from the world. Wildflowers, tall oaks, and a small pond that caught the sunrise every morning. Then came the HOA, shiny brochures, friendly smiles, and promises of community improvement. They introduced themselves like neighbors but acted like land surveyors, always asking about property lines, zoning, and shared access. I brushed it off at first. Everyone wants to feel important in a new neighborhood, right? But things started to change. I noticed fresh stakes in the ground, bright orange flags marking lines that cut straight across my field. Construction trucks began showing up earlier each week. One day, a stranger in a hard hat waved at me and said they were expanding Phase 2. Phase 2? No one had asked me about a Phase 1. Soon I realized the meetings, the mailers, the polite visits. They weren't about inclusion. They were about acquisition. The HOA wasn't just managing homes. They were building their empire, and my land was next on their map. That's when I started keeping notes. Every letter, every photo, every boundary marker. Because deep down I knew this wasn't just a mistake, it was the beginning of a war they didn't even realize they'd started. It started small, like most HOA nightmares do. A letter in the mail sealed with the association's crisp logo and written in that polite but threatening tone they've perfected. Dear resident, we've noticed encroachments extending beyond approved boundaries. Please address this immediately to avoid penalties. Encroachments? My land was the one untouched thing left in this overdeveloped maze of houses. Still, I played along. I walked the property lines, took photos, checked my deed. Everything matched. But the letters kept coming, each one more assertive, more entitled. Then came the visits. HOA board members showing up in their khakis and clipboards, pretending to make friendly inspections. They'd stand just inside my property, arguing over imaginary borders and community improvements. I asked them to leave more than once. They never did. Weeks turned into months. The sound of construction grew louder. Trucks rumbled over what used to be my quiet dirt road. They started clearing trees, my trees, to extend the cul-de-sac. I tried reasoning with them, showing maps, documents, boundaries, but they waved me off, saying the land fell within the new zoning plan. That's when I realized something was deeply wrong. The HOA wasn't confused. They were confident. They believed they owned my land. The county office was no help either. Every time I called, someone new answered, someone looking into it. Files went missing. Permits were revised. It was as if the HOA had friends in all the right places. One afternoon, I came home to find survey stakes running right through my backyard. A bulldozer sat idling near my fence. I yelled, but the workers shrugged. We're just following plans. I remember standing there, dirt on my shoes, papers in my hand, watching them tear into the soil my father and I had planted trees in 20 years ago. It didn't feel real, so I started documenting everything: dates, names, faces. I filmed the trucks, photographed the blueprints they left behind, copied every HOA letter and legal notice. I even drove to the courthouse myself to pull every public record I could find. What I discovered made my stomach drop. The HOA had filed an annexation request, quietly expanding their map to include my property. They hadn't bought it. They hadn't asked. They'd just drawn a new line on paper and convinced the county it was official. By the time I realized, the foundation for the first new home was already poured. Neighbors stopped waving. Some avoided eye contact altogether. The HOA warned them not to get involved. A few whispered that I should just take the payout and move on. But this wasn't about money anymore. It was about ownership. Of land, yes, but also of dignity. Then came the fines. Thousands of dollars for failure to comply. They claimed I was blocking construction access to community property. They even threatened to put a lien on my home. I didn't sleep much after that. Nights were filled with headlights flashing across my yard, engines idling in the dark, and the constant hum of generators. My once quiet sanctuary had become a construction zone. A battlefield. Every instinct told me to fight back, but I knew rushing in would be a mistake. They were organized. They had lawyers. They were certain of their power. So I did the one thing they didn't expect. I waited. I let them build. Every wall they raised, every driveway they poured, every manicured lawn, all of it went deeper into what was still legally my property. I watched as 96 homes took shape, all standing proudly on land I never sold. The HOA president would nod at me sometimes smugly, as if daring me to stop them. I just smiled back. Because deep down I knew something they didn't. When the time came, when the papers were signed, the homes sold, and the community declared complete, I'd be ready to remind them whose land they were really standing on. And when that moment arrived, it wouldn't just be a legal fight. It would be the reckoning they'd never forget. The day of the court hearing felt like walking into a storm I'd been watching build for years. The HOA showed up in full force. Board members in suits, lawyers with thick folders, the president smiling like victory was already his. I sat alone at the end of the table, calm, collected, with one old leather folder in front of me, the same one that had held my father's deed for over 30 years. Their lawyer started first, confident, rehearsed. He talked about community development, zoning adjustments, and mutual benefit. He painted me as an obstacle, an outdated landowner clinging to a past that didn't fit the new Maple Ridge vision. The HOA members nodded in unison, like a well-trained choir. Then it was my turn. I stood, opened the folder, and laid the papers across the table. Original survey maps, signatures, the recorded deed, unbroken, unamended, never sold. Then I handed the judge a certified copy stamped by the county recorder's office, dated before the HOA even existed. For a few seconds, the room was silent. The HOA president leaned forward, eyes flicking between the maps and the deed, searching for a loophole that wasn't there. Then the judge looked up and said the words I'd been waiting years to hear. Legally, this land has never changed ownership. The association has built on private property. Every structure, every home, stands on land that does not belong to them. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, frantic papers, rustling. The HOA lawyer's face went pale. The president tried to object, but his voice cracked under the weight of what he'd just lost. 96 homes, millions of dollars, all on my land. I didn't gloat. I just gathered my folder, nodded at the judge, and walked out. Outside, the sky broke open, a light drizzle falling over the rows of pristine houses that, in a single ruling, no longer belonged to the people inside them. They thought they'd buried me in paperwork. Instead, they built me a monument. And this was only the beginning of their unraveling. In the weeks that followed, Maple Ridge Estates unraveled faster than anyone imagined. The headlines hit every local paper. HOA built 96 homes on private land. Panic spread through the community like wildfire. Homeowners who once ignored my warnings now flooded the courthouse steps, desperate for answers. Their dream homes had become legal ghosts, built on ground they didn't own. The HOA board resigned one by one, hiding behind lawyers and press statements. The president, the man who once smiled at me from across the fence, vanished from town entirely. Lawsuits piled up like bricks, each one heavier than the last. As for me, I didn't demand evictions or destruction. I gave them a choice: buy the land they built on, or leave it standing in my name. Either way, the deed stayed mine. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoring what was taken, and proving that sometimes Quiet patience can be the sharpest weapon of all. Months later, I walked through the same cul-de-sac where this all began. Children still played. Lawns still gleamed. But every homeowner now knew whose soil lay beneath their feet, and the cost of assuming power without respect. Looking back, I realized this story was never just about property. It was about boundaries, the ones on maps, and the ones people cross when greed convinces them they're untouchable. They thought they could take what wasn't theirs. They forgot that paper, when signed and sealed, can be more powerful than concrete. So next time someone tells you it's just business, remember, some deeds can't be rewritten.